On today's show, after a frustrating 4-0 loss to Buffalo last night, Senators head coach Travis Green has shuffled his lineup, including a couple of call-ups from Belleville.
And some good news, the Ottawa Senators lock up one of their top young forwards for 4 years.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Friday, January 10th, and Pilsy, there is so much from practice I want to get into today, but the big news is Ridley Greig's 4-year contract extension. It's a $13 million contract, meaning his cap hit will be $3.25. What was your thoughts when you saw the news?
First reaction was, this is surprising. I didn't think that they were working on a deal, or I didn't think that this was going to be something that was on Steve Staios' top priority list right now, but I think it's a good deal. I think it's a good deal for Ridley Greig. He gets some security, 4 years at $3.25. That's a nice contract for a guy that's in the final year of his entry-level deal and whose career high in points is 26 points last season in 17 games. Funny enough, he's projected to get the same amount of points if he plays 79 games this season. He's projected to get 13 goals, 13 assists again, so at least he's consistent. And I think this is a great deal for the Ottawa Senators, Ross, because it's a 4-year deal, so you know you're going to have him for 4 years at a nice price, $3.25. He's been playing on the top line with Brady Tkachuk and Shane Pinto. Now that those lines have changed, we'll get into that later. And the best thing is, Ross, he's still an RFA at the end of this year. I think maybe sometimes people forget how young Ridley Greig is. He's only 22. So it's nice that they'll still have one more kind of opportunity with team control there, even when this contract's over.
Yeah, I know goaltenders are different, but it's funny. Both he and Levi Merilainen are August 2002 birthdays, and yet one's like, oh, the youngest goalie to get 2 wins in the NHL this year, and now Ridley Greig making his 3rd season in the NHL, although the first one just played 20 games, had his first full year last year playing 72 out of 82. So my thoughts on the deal is that I think he's going to grow into this. I have faith in the type of player that he is, kind of a middle six versatile pest that can produce a bit of offense. Just ended a 3-game goal streak not too long ago. So it was nice to see him get a little bit more offense in him. I thought we'd be maybe a half step ahead offensively than where he was this year. Now, he started the season on the 4th line. You might remember in the first couple of games of the year. Then all of a sudden, he's on the top line. He's playing 3rd line center for a little bit. He's been really a Swiss Army knife for this team. So there is value in that. I think right now it's a little high based on what he's accomplished already. But again, with the cap going up and this deal only starting next season, I understand the thought process from Steve Staios. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's a steal for the Senators. And I'm not going to say, wow, Ridley Greig robbed them blind. I think it's a tidy bit of business. It's a fair contract. And if he can grow into his potential, I see this as being a win-win scenario for both the team and the player. And you hit on a very important fact. Still RFA when the contract is done. I would imagine he'll have arbitration rights by then, but at that point, you're hoping that he is at least a $3.25 million per year player. I like him. I think he's a pest. And you mentioned how he's on pace for the same amount of goals, same amount of assists for last season. What I do like is he's on pace for 22 less penalty minutes because he took a lot of minors last year that weren't always smart penalties. And I think that this year he's done a lot better. He's still throwing the odd big hit. He can crush guys. Remember last year, the Ristolainen hit in Philadelphia that then ended up being a goal for Ottawa? He started that whole play with a big hit. We know that he's got the pizzazz, the empty netter on Toronto, but I feel like that's kind of become his national name brand, the empty net slap shot, but he brings a lot more to the table than just that. I think in a perfect world, he's a Scott Laughton type player that there's a reason why Philly, his name's been out there, but Philly wants like a high price tag because teams value this type of player. Where I want this conversation to go, though, is what this means for the core of the Ottawa Senators, because, I mean, we had been talking, whether it's off air or on air, Pilsy, that you got to give to get, and that he could have been a guy where you get value back if you're looking to shake things up. But this signals to me that Steve Staios sees Ridley Greig as a part of the core of this team. Are you A, surprised about that? And B, what do you think this means for the other guy? Where do you see Ridley Greig fitting in long-term on this team, at center or wing?
I don't know. As the team is now, Ross, he's a winger. He's not going to beat out Stützle, Norris, or Pinto for any of the top 3 center jobs, and it doesn't make much sense to have him as a 4th-line center. So that puts him on the wing, where he's been good. He's I think he belongs on the wing, and the versatility, at least for now, the versatility of him being a winger, he can play your top wing, 2nd-line wing, or 3rd-line wing, and he can make it all work. For me, Ross, I was heavy on the camp, and I want to preface this discussion by saying I like Ridley Greig. I also believe in Ridley Greig. When he signed his contract, he told Steve Staios, thanks for believing in me. I believe he can become a good player. I believe he will fulfill the value of this deal, especially in years 3 and 4. And when you look at the percentage of what the cap will be based on the cap continuing to go up. But that was your one big trade piece, in my opinion. And now that you've signed him to a 4-year deal, I think it makes him, obviously it shows the Sens want to keep him. So he's probably not on the trade board. I don't think he probably was even before this anyways, but teams would have been more interested in acquiring him if they would have had the opportunity to negotiate his next deal. And he's one of the few players on this team that isn't locked up and is young, and teams see a lot of value. Like Ridley Greig for a playoff team would hold a lot of value. Those are the types of guys, when teams go on long runs, you're like, he was a big part of that bottom 6, why this team was so successful in the playoffs. Now, hopefully that's the story of him with an Ottawa Senators uniform on, but I worry about this a little bit, Ross, because now I think this signals that Steve Staios and Michael Andlauer are saying, we think we have the right group here and we're going to figure it out eventually. The Ottawa Senators haven't made the playoffs in 7 years, and they've locked up all their young guys except for Shane Pinto, which I was heavily in favor of a bridge deal for Pinto. I'm glad they bridged him. But I start to get nervous about locking up every single young piece this team has when they haven't even been close to being successful. They haven't even sniffed playoffs. So personally, I would have liked to maybe see them use Ridley Greig to try to bring in some already established veteran talent to mix up this core. But obviously that's not the case. And I'm happy that they signed him to, in my mind, what is a team-friendly deal now.
So with Ridley Greig now locked up, and I know he's playing the wing right now, but I see him as a centerman long-term. I think that's where he's had his best games at the National Hockey League level. He's improved his faceoffs dramatically. We know when guys come into the league, they struggle. He went from 39% to 43%, and albeit in a few less draws this year, he's taken 92 faceoffs, and he's at 51%. So he's basically snapping them back 50% of the time, a little bit better. So all that to say, to me, all eyes are on Josh Norris right now. And his production has dipped. They need him to get going. But that's an $8 million chip that has been underperforming. And I just think that this, to me, if you're going to shake things up now, like the question then you have to ask is Shane Pinto a top 6 center? Or are you going to try to get one back in a deal? But I think that this signing, to me, signals that with the structure now of having all those $8 million guys, but now having a couple of these mid-range guys like Ottawa, they've got Shane Pinto at 3.75 and then nobody else until 2.6. Like they don't have a lot of those middle range guys that they've now signed Ridley Greig to. And I wonder if that, to me, is an establishment that maybe they want to trim a little bit off the top end and have a little bit more of the middle ground. And I guess you could say that David Perreault is making $4 million. That's a little bit higher, but still in that mid-range. I'm just really intrigued to see. I don't think something's going to happen imminently, but long-term throughout the extension, and once Ridley Greig's hits and then Shane Pinto becomes an RFA after next season, his bridge deal's up, I wonder about Josh Norris a lot. And we know that he's got the talent to be an amazing, offensively gifted, two-way even guy at the NHL level, but his production needs to improve. Again, pretty invisible in last night's game. Josh Norris, that is. But let us know your thoughts on Ridley Greig's contract extension And what timing, eh, Pillsy? The morning after a bad loss, a little distraction or what?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I thought it was funny. Like, this was at Steve Staios' top priority list to get this done now. So that is a little funny for me. But I want to touch on the Josh Norris discussion because here's the thing. I think Josh Norris has been available for trade for pretty much since the moment Steve Staios entered this job. I think that's one of those things where he's like, this isn't my guy. I didn't lock him up, and I would like to use that $8 million in ways that I see fit. But for me, the issue is I don't think you're getting proper value back in a trade for Josh Norris. I think if you're trading him, you're going to lose value on that trade with the idea that we're going to lose value on the return, but gain value by gaining cap space. I don't think you're going to include Josh Norris in a trade to acquire someone better than Josh Norris. And if that's the case, unless you have some grand plan for that cap space, which the Ottawa Senators famously still have not been great at pro scouting and finding the right guys to fill in when they decide to do moves like this, you're almost better keeping him and hoping that he figures it out. And is that going to happen? I don't know, but I know everyone's excited about the fact that JT Miller and Elias Pettersson are available for trade in Vancouver. It's been very clear that that's the case. But if I'm the Vancouver Canucks, trading one of those guys for Josh Norris is not a move that makes their team better. I guess maybe you get some cap space if you move Elias Pettersson in that. But the Ottawa Senators would, like, the rumor is it's a Jack Eichel type trade. So if you're looking at that, that included Alex Tuck. So let's say Josh Norris is the Alex Tuck type player here. Peyton Krebs, a top blue chip prospect. And wasn't it a first rounder as well?
Yeah, I believe so.
And the Ottawa Senators are not in a position where they can trade away a first rounder. Their prospect pool is empty apart from Carter Yakimchuk. And
Blake Montgomery. Come on, fella.
Oh, he's not a blue chip prospect. They're fourth round picks. I like them. Good value there, Ross, but that's not a blue chip prospect. So that moves the needle too much, in my opinion. And you cannot trade a first round pick away when you're getting one taken away by the league. I've lost all faith that Gary Bettman's going to change his mind on that. Seems like he's playing hardball, and the NHL hates the Ottawa Senators, so that's not going to change. So I think the Josh Norris trade probably is what's going to happen, but I don't think it improves your team right away when it does, unfortunately.
So more to come on that front, and let us know your comments. That's a very deep discussion about what this Ridley Greig contract means going forward for the core of the Ottawa Senators. On the other side, who's left to sign now that Ridley Greig's gone? We'll look at the pending unrestricted and restricted free agents and the lineup today. Wow. Not only were there recalls from Belleville in Matthew Highmore and Zach McEwen, but we got injury updates on Michael Amadio, David Perron, and did Linus Ullmark skate today? That's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And NFL playoffs start this weekend. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com today and get started with $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. For NFL playoffs, Ross, I like to make a parlay betting on each team that I think is going to win, and then you're invested in every game. So make parlays, get your futures in, Super Bowl futures. This is the season. Hopefully you pick a team that wins a playoff game or two, and then you get to be at a point where you decide, do I keep going? Do I hedge? Do I cash out? That's the fun of following along with the NFL playoffs. So make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub, our pub in the heart of the Glebe at 779 Bank Street. Let them know that Locked On Senators sent you, and on game days, you will get 10% off your order. They've got the vibes that are absolutely free. They've got great food. I'm a big fan of the nachos. Always get those when I'm there because I can pick at them and make sure I'm having fun with my friends as well. Every Saturday night, live music at the GLEBE Central Pub. Tomorrow, Fabian Melanson will be on the stage, and they've got all sorts of fun activities at the Glebe Central Pub. How about Tuesday trivia? Every Tuesday, they got wing night all day on Monday. That's $1 per breaded wing, 80 cents per naked wing with the purchase of a beverage. Taco Thursday, $5 each. Always something going on at the GCP. Plus, how about the Sens Shuttle? You can get your tickets onto the Sens Shuttle for just $17 round trip, including next Thursday against the Washington Capitals. So there will not be a bus this Sunday, but next Thursday, the next bus going on January 16th, 7 o'clock game, which means the bus leaves at 5:45 p.m. from 779 Bank Street, and it'll bring you right back to the pub after the game. So head to where the vibes are free. That's the GCP, and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. All right, Millsy. So, with the Ottawa Senators locking up Ridley Greig to a 4-year extension beginning next season and taking him through his age 26 season, he will be able to take off of a list that is now shrinking, Millsy, of players who need a contract for the Ottawa Senators this offseason. Thanks to our friends at Puckpedia for the graphic here. And now, all eyes turn to Claude Giroux. That's the big question mark here. Pending unrestricted free agent. The other unrestricted free agents, Nick Cousins, Adam Gaudette, Travis Hamonic, and Anton Forsberg. The restricted free agents are Noah Gregor, Tyler Kleven, Jacob Bernard-Docker, Max Gannett, and Nicholas Matin-Palo. And Levi Merilainen is an RFA goaltender after this year. How do you approach this if you're Steve Staios and Sens management? Is there anyone else you'd like to lock up before the season gets too far?
Well, I think Claude Giroux is going to be interesting, Ross. I think for the remainder of his career, he's just going to sign 1-year deals. I have a feeling that he's going to sign a 1-year deal. I don't know, maybe somewhere in the 4.5 range or something like that. And then if things don't go the way he hoped they would go in Ottawa, I think he's going to look elsewhere to try to chase that cup at the end of his career, which you can't really blame him. Hopefully things turn around and he can do it here in Ottawa. Nick Cousins, if you can bring Nick Cousins back on a deal, 1-year deal that's less than $1 million, I'm all for that. Adam Gaudette, I don't think he's sticking around. Travis Hamonic certainly is not sticking around. Anton Forsberg certainly is not sticking around. So with the UFAs, I think you're looking at short-term deals that continue to give you flexibility.
And we will continue to follow that as things develop. But Pillsy, actually, let's just get right to the lines of today's practice. I mentioned Matthew Highmore and Zach McEwen both called up. The top line, though, is different. And thank goodness, because the offense had been so dry. Shut out in 2 of their last 3 games. Only 1 even strength goal, but it was the power play unit that was still out there 5 seconds after in Detroit. So really, for all intents and purposes, no even strength goals in 3 straight games. So that they need to figure this out big time, because 4 games ago was the Dallas Stars. And guess what? They're playing them again on Sunday. We cannot go in between with just so few offensive looks and goals at even strength. Tim Stützle has been put back on the center ice position with Brady Tkachuk. Ridley Greig stays at right wing on that line. Josh Norris back in a top 6 position with Claude Giroux and Drake Batherson. That's been a common line throughout the season. You got Shane Pinto centering Zach Ostapchuk, but they also said on TSN 1200 that Matthew Highmore was taking a few spins on that spot where Zach Ostapchuk was. We'll see what that means going into the weekend. Nick Cousins at right wing on the 3rd line. 4th line is Adam Gaudette with Cole Reinhardt and Zach McEwen. On the back end, Thomas Chabot, and I put Nick Jensen here. He wasn't at practice today. I got to think he's battling something like that. It was just a boneheaded pass last night on the 3rd goal. Like, that's not how Nick Jensen plays. One of the most responsible players on the team. He just has looked like a shell of himself in 2 of the last 3 games. Then Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub, Tyler Kleven with Nicholas Matin-Palo, Anton Forsberg, Levi Merilainen in goal. Pillsy, Travis Green was asked about Linus Ullmark after the morning skate, and he said, quote, "It's not like we're trying to hold back information. We're dealing with a back, and sometimes it takes more time than others. Ullmark skated a bit by himself this morning."
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying a couple episodes ago, right? Like a back injury, it's not like you have clear timetables and it's going to go the same way, the exact same time for every single person. It's really tricky. It's good to hear that at least he's putting skates on and testing it out, but that is a sliver of sunshine, Ross. I don't think we're anywhere near him getting back into games because, and I know people get on me and they think I hate Allmark because I say this, but I say it because I love Allmark. I don't want him rushing back because if you rush him back and he tweaks his back again, it's just a complete disaster, as we're seeing right now with him out with a back injury. So for me, I'd rather take it with very big precaution, especially Ross. This is a guy that's already signed to a 4-year extension. So you don't want to ride him too hard and make his back even worse for the remainder of his contract here. So you got to take it slow steps here, even though I'd love him playing just as much as every other Sens fan.
So we got to assume he's out for both games this weekend. Head coach
Definitely.
Travis Green also noting that Michael Amadio and David Perron are out this weekend. Even though they were both at practice now for a second straight day wearing a non-contact jersey, neither will take part in either game this weekend. The earliest they can return is Tuesday in New York when they take on the Islanders. What's your thoughts on having Tim Stützle back with Brady Tkachuk and then having Ridley Greig on that line?
Well, the line of Tkachuk, Pinto, and Greig had been kind of the most consistent and successful line recently. So I think this is Travis Green being like, all right, we got to find a way to get Timmy going here. I had hoped Tim Stützle was going to have a big night last night. That didn't happen. So I think I like this approach, Ross, being like, all right, put our best guy who's been struggling with the two guys that have been doing well. And I think that's a big reason why Ridley Greig got that nice new contract is they're seeing how well he's playing in a top line position and being like, the price for him could go up if he continues to have success on a top line with Captain Brady Tkachuk. So that makes sense for me. Norris, like we mentioned, you got to get him going, whether it's to increase or give him trade value or just the fact you're paying him nearly $8 million and he's got to do something. So give him good line mates like Giroux and Batherson instead of being on the third line. And then you hope that Pinto can rekindle some of that chemistry that he had with Nick Cousins. Now it's not Michael Amadio with them. It's going to be Zach Ostapchuk or Matthew Highmore. Not sure which one. And then Adam Gaudette has been invisible. So I think putting him down to the fourth line makes sense.
And that's where he had all of his success too.
Yeah, it's true. And you hope that going up against other teams' probable fourth lines and probable third pairs will make things a little easier for him to get the time and space he needs to be effective.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see this because one of their best lines, the best line in expected goals percentage this year is Norris, Tkachuk, and Greig. So I'm curious to see because Tkachuk, Stützle, and Greig's only played 58 minutes together.
How much time did those three play together, Ross? Norris, Tkachuk, and Greig?
52. So actually a bit less than Stützle, Tkachuk, Greig, who's at 58. And expected goals wise, both sets are good. Stützle, Tkachuk, Greig at 62.7% there. But to me, this is a better bottom six. And I think Zach Ostapchuk, will see what happens. To me, when I saw it initially, I was like, oh, maybe they think Perron or Amadio is going to be back and get that third line back in order with Cousins, Pinto, and Amadio, or Perron, whoever is back first. But will not happen in the next two games. And no. I don't know if Matthew Highmore is going to get in. I hope not. I don't mean to sound rude, but I'm just not a Matthew Highmore in the NHL kind of guy. Guy's got 2 goals in Belleville all year. Like, I just don't know how Angus Crookshank didn't get that opportunity, but that's neither here nor there. Just want to.
I think it is here or there, Ross.
Well,
like we're talking about.
Extra.
I want to get into this a little bit here. We're talking about a bottom six, or talking about a team that cannot produce offensively. For me, it's such a wild decision not to allow Angus Crookshank the opportunity to get called up. He had 13 games in the NHL last season. I mean, that was a weird time for him to come in. The DJ Smith firing and on that road trip was a majority of them, but he did score 2 goals, had 1 assist. And I think if you're trying to inject some goal scoring into your bottom six, I've said it, Ross, I want Angus Crookshank as a third line winger. I just think it makes so much more sense to have a line of Crooker, Pinto, and Cousins. I think would be so much more effective than a line of Ostapchuk or Highmore paired with or in that trio with Pinto and Cousins. So for me, I'm I'm disappointed that this is the route that they went. And I'm sure Angus Crookshank's got to be disappointed as well, seeing a handful of guys get opportunities before him when this is the time where you know what Matthew Highmore is in the NHL. He's got so many NHL seasons under his belt. Why not try to spark things and get a guy like Crooker up there? Crazy.
I'm really of the mind that it's time for Zach Ostapchuk to go back to Belleville. And I know they're not healthy, like they lose Noah Gregor as well, but that's more of a Zach McEwen fourth line call up.
Yep.
Just put him down there, play 6-7 minutes a night. But like Ostapchuk's a guy that you want to develop properly, and he's averaging less than 9 minutes a night in his last 9 games. No points, -4, 3 minor penalties in there as well, 8 shots on goal, and it's just to me, it's time. It's time. He's had
Get
a
him
decent
playing a
run
top
here.
6 role in Belleville. That's so much more useful for his development, in my opinion. I'm with you on that.
26 games this year for Zach Ostapchuk. Still looking for his first career NHL goal.
Yeah.
Still lots of runway, though, for him in his career. On the other side, weekend preview coming up. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Now Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This is awesome, guys. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you're not wasting time searching through thousands of tickets you don't even want. Recently, I was looking for tickets for the Sens game up against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm going to that first game. They play twice there in February, and I used Gametime Picks to find an awesome deal. And you can view your view from your seat before you buy. I've never been in that barn, so I wanted to make sure the sight lines were what I was looking for. And I hate getting surprised at checkouts with fees, so turn on the all-in pricing so you know what it's going to cost you up front. No gimmicks, no funny business. That's the price you're paying. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time.
All right, Pilsy. So a very different looking Ottawa Senators formation. Sounds like they had some off-ice meetings trying to get out of this 1-5-1 funk that they're in right now since Linus Ullmark got hurt in the game before the Christmas break. Just an unfortunate set of circumstances for the Ottawa Senators right now. They're grinding through it, and unfortunately, the offense has been a black hole. The top-end guys have to get going. Need them to. And especially, I'm looking at the top guys like Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk, who just were not at their best last night.
Yeah, last night, but I feel like Brady Tkachuk's been decent. Like I think
I love Brady Tkachuk, but he's been taking a couple bad penalties in the last 2 games.
Well, and that's what happens, Ross. We've been there, seen this before. When Brady Tkachuk things don't go his way, he gets frustrated, and this happens. Like fighting Gilbert, a guy we didn't even have in our lineup for our game day preview. That goes to show you that Brady Tkachuk had his wires crossed, and he was just going to take it out on anyone.
But that's the frustration at the end of a game. He's had 3 minor penalties in the first period of the last 2 games.
Yeah, and that's definitely fair. But
and he's lucky. He's
at
lucky.
least been consistent.
Brady Tkachuk's lucky he didn't get tossed from last night's game. That was completely in the numbers. That could have been 5 in a game, and nobody could have complained about that.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, Ross, I was worried last night could go badly, but I can't believe how bad it went. And I'm blaming the white jerseys at home. I don't like that at all. We already went over this, so I'm not going to open that can again. But the fact that after a 9-game road trip, you come home and you play the Buffalo Sabres and you get blanked 4-0, and especially like that, Ross, where the Sabres were looking at like the goals other than the Shabbat goal, but like Jack Quinn scoring that breakaway goal, that was, I feel like when he was selling, he was almost laughing. He's like, what? Like, how was I able to get that much time and space and just pick my spot and rip it top shelf on Forsey like that? Like that.
First one was worse, man. First one was way worse. At least that one's like out of a penalty box. Dude, Ottawa had a backdoor tap in play, and all of a sudden it's a 2-on-0 the other way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, either of those goals, Ross. The fact that we're having a debate on which goal was worse is not a good sign here. Up against, may I remind you, the Buffalo Sabres, a team that had a 13-game losing streak and hasn't made the playoffs in 13 years. Like, I know you guys did this on the postcast yesterday, Ross, so I'll try not to get myself too riled up here and pretty much echo all those statements, but it's just completely unacceptable, and I can't, like, that locker room's got to be feeling pretty low right now.
Yeah, it gotta be. And no players spoke with the media after the game last night. Interesting, but hopefully that frustration can be taken out on the Pittsburgh Penguins tomorrow. A team Ottawa is 1-0 against this year. I'm calling this an enormous game. We've had a couple big games, but this is a team that you're right behind chasing. You have games in hand on them. This is the definition of a 4-point game right now for Ottawa.
Yeah, definitely. And last time they played them, Ross, it was a back-to-back, and Anton Forsberg was supposed to start that game. I can't believe I'm bringing this up, but that was Linus Ullmark's back-to-back games. And Linus Ullmark, I don't want to say I don't know. Would you say he bailed the team out on that one? Not necessarily. He had his stellar game up against Carolina.
No, he was the better goalie for sure.
Yeah, better goalie, but we're looking across the rink at
very good. Dude,
Tristan Jarry and Delkovich, whose numbers are terrible.
That was the game where he pulled the Carlson shot off the goal line with his paddle. He won them that game for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, that even furthers my point, Ross, that this is not going to be an easy game because you don't have Linus Ullmark there to bail you out. Do we want to get into the discussion? Who starts next game? Like, do you give Forsey a bounce back opportunity? Not necessarily. That last night was completely on him, like we talked about. Those 2 goals, the Sens just complete defensive lapses, and then the third goal ricochets off Shabbat's foot and goes top shelf, so that's not on Forsey. But how do you feel about the way they're going to approach this starting wise? There's no way, I know I've said this before, but there's no way we're considering one goalie for both here, right?
No, you can't do that. Levy had a good game against Dallas last time.
That's what I was thinking, but the points up against Dallas, like, that's a 2-point game, Ross. You just said it. This game up against Pittsburgh, that's a 4-point game. So I guess what I'm asking, Ross, let me rephrase it this way, is which goalie do you have more confidence in can win you a game up against Pittsburgh, the game that means more? Or does the Dallas game mean more because it's at home and you want to get a home boost?
It's not a very confident decision either way, I'll tell you that much. Forsberg, again, it's not on him. The team was so bad in front of him. We were very clear on the postcast. That was not an Anton Forsberg loss, but at the end of the day, numbers don't lie. And it was 4 goals on 13 shots at one point in that game. So it's infuriating to see. And there's a stat Sportsnet put out that Senators goalies who have not been pulled in games. So when you get pulled, you can have some really skewed numbers. That makes sense. But Senators goalies that don't get pulled have an .857 save percentage this season when facing fewer than 25 shots. But then when they face more than 25 shots, their save percentage is .915.
Yeah.
How is that? I know that goalies like feeling the puck. They like getting into a rhythm, but like, that's outrageous.
Well, and Ross, it's especially frustrating because in those games as a team and as a coaching staff, you feel like you deserve to win those games. And that's where it's so demoralizing and they've held some good teams to low shot totals. You feel like you played a strong, structured defensive game. And usually I feel like in those games, Ross, where they don't allow a lot of shots, they put a lot of shots on themselves. It's not like they just barely get the puck towards net. Like usually they're in the high 20s or at least 30s in those scenarios. So you feel like you had a really good game, but just to quote DJ Smith, the bounces don't go your way. And that is where, as a team, you let your shoulders drop and you put your head down and you're like, well, here we go again. Like, we're playing our asses off, but we can't get the production that we want and we're losing these games. So I don't know what the solution is, Ross. And that's the thing with this Sens team, especially with all the injuries that are happening. It's not like there's a clear-cut solution other than Linus Ullmark coming back.
Score first. They've allowed the first goal in 5 straight games, and
that would certainly help. Yeah,
got 1 win in those games. Like,
sure.
Their splits when they allow and score the first goal is outrageous right now. And Now you have to learn how to play from behind. And I think that Jack made a great point last night about how Nick Jensen in his first period intermission was like, no matter what the score is, we play the same way. And I get that from a structure standpoint, but clearly the way that they play is not built for mounting comebacks. Like that to me is something that needs to be adjusted so that you play to the score to an extent and push for offense when you need it. Like that was a mirage last night in the third period where Ottawa outshot Buffalo big time and really skewed the numbers for the game. They had 6 shots in the second period when they came into it down 2-0. That was your time to put everything on net, not when it's 4-0 and score effects take place.
Agreed. Yeah. And that's a good point. Yeah. Because like obviously you don't want your team to drastically change how they play based on the score. But sometimes you got to say, all right, we're down 2. Let's cheat a little on offense. Try to get 1 at least to boost momentum and get the crowd into this. Because like that, I can only imagine, Ross. Did you guys have a boots on the ground?
Yeah, Nick Spence jumped on.
Okay, so I'd be interested to hear how he said that building was, because I can't imagine there was any energy or excitement in that building from the fans when you're getting beat like that from the Buffalo Sabres. Maybe the Brady Tkachuk fight, because that was a spirited fight. But,
they booed up. The crowd was rightfully pissed off. That was
definitely
an awful re-entry, first home game in almost a month, and that's the
crazy.
That's the game that they get. Just awful. So this weekend, humongous. We'll have postcasts after both games, Saturday and Sunday. So we'll see you then. We also want to wish Tyler Clevin a happy birthday as well. 23 years old today, and another member of that 2020 draft class that saw Ridley Greig just sign his ticket today. Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Yes, final thoughts for me, Ross. Usually I like to save my final thoughts for the Belleville Senators, so I will do that again today. Michael Andlauer was on TSN during the intermission with our friend Claire Hanna, and he squashed the rumors that there is any possibility that the Belleville Senators will be leaving from Belleville. I think this is great news, Ross. I know there's rumors that there was going to be swaps with the OHL team, all kinds of things like that, and there's still ongoing, or I guess not ongoing discussions. The team has been reported to be sold, the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL. But Belleville Senators are staying in Belleville. I think it makes sense location-wise. It's like when you have a AHL team in a different country, calling guys up, it just adds complication. It's just down the highway. And the people of Belleville, like, if they're going to support this team fully, they've got to lay down roots there, and they still have work to do, I believe, in the community to get people engaged and involved in the team. So I think the fact that Andlauer was very clear that it's staying in Belleville was a positive sign for sure for this organization.
And Andlauer has reportedly sold the Brantford Bulldogs to the Hyman family, both Zach Hyman and his old man. So there you have it. Some updates from the off-ice standpoint for the Belleville Senators. By the way, a guy from NHL Edge Stats just replied to our tweet saying that the Sens were 8-0-1 in Linus Ullmark's last 9 games. They're 1-5-1 since. He notes that Ottawa's got a 32nd place goals for per game since Linus Ullmark went out.
It's not injury. Surprising. Yeah.
They're averaging 1.5 goals per game.
It's insane. Yeah. And we talk about the injuries as being a part of that, but the top dogs aren't injured. They're just not producing.
They aren't. And another opportunity to do that tomorrow, going up against Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a team that, I mean, if you want to be taken seriously, especially after how disgusting last night's game was, you got to be able to beat the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are 18, 17, and 8 on the season. So they're getting their overtime and shootout losses like they did against Ottawa. They've still got Sidney Crosby. They just beat the Edmonton Oilers. Crosby's at 47 points on the season. Dash 11, though, surprises me. But he's got an 11-point lead on the rest of his team. So go into Pittsburgh, tough barn to play in. Do what you can to come out with 2 points, because you got to turn around quick and take on the Dallas Stars on Sunday. In tonight's NHL action, we are all Washington Capitals fans. The Caps are hosting the Montreal Canadiens in that game. That is one of 2 games that matters to the Ottawa Senators. Elsewhere, we're rooting for the Chicago Blackhawks on the road in Detroit, trying to snap the Wings' 5-game winning streak. We'll see how it develops. We'll be following that at Sens Central on Twitter. Please like and subscribe everywhere you get podcasts. Goes a long way to helping the show grow. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.